Hello, everyone. I'm Graham Ledger, and welcome to the Daily Ledger. Our cover story, the budgeting bellicose in Congress. The process of funding government into the fall is exposing who are the few remaining fiscal conservatives on Capitol Hill and who are not. Unfortunately for the American people, the nots outnumber the conservatives who truly comprehend the dangers of the debt while trying to deliver on promises made to voters.
The appropriations package in front of us is the first successful bicameral, bipartisan negotiation of the Trump administration. It has broad bipartisan support in both houses of Congress. All members can feel good about the work of the Appropriations Committee. The package in front of us not only keeps the government open and operating through the end of the fiscal year, but it also represents the successful completion of key member priorities on both sides of the aisle. This bill provides for a $25.7 billion increase in defense spending, notably including an additional $7.3 billion for Department of Defense readiness and training, as well as the largest pay raise our troops have received in 6 years. These funds will help us enhance our military readiness and marks an end to the erosion of our national military strength. Importantly, we accomplished this without a dollar-for-dollar increase in non-defense discretionary spending, a practice which was imposed upon us by the previous administration. This measure also provides for an increase of $1.5 billion in funding for border security. $772 million is available for key administration priorities like border security technology enhancements and infrastructure improvements. It also increases funding for Customs and Border Patrol to improve operational effectiveness.
Congressman Cole is one of the nots. Now, in the Senate, the Republican leadership is afraid of its own shadow, which looks a lot like this thing called government shutdown. And one of Mitch McConnell's lieutenants is surrendering without a fight, like the good Frenchmen that they are.
So I'm glad we found a way to fund the government and to actually govern while doing more for our national defense and security, particularly security along the border. But let's not lose sight of the ultimate aim here. Our country needs long-term, sustainable funding for our government, particularly for our national security, so they can plan and prepare for years ahead. And the stop-start of short-term continuing resolutions or the threat of a government shutdown does not facilitate that sort of planning and preparation. That's why the appropriations process was designed to work best. And that's what I hope we're all working toward, a restoration of the normal appropriation process. No more of these narratives about shutdowns. We weren't elected, in my view, certainly not given the majority here in the Senate and in the House, as well as a president in the White House, to shut down the government.
And that leads us to the true leader of the United States Senate. Certainly not Mitch McConnell. It is the detestable senator from New York, Chuck Schumer.
We all spent a lot of time working on it, and I think we got a very good outcome. So, when the president threw cold water on this deal and actually recommended a government shutdown, I was deeply disappointed. Here we saw Democrats and Republicans working together in the best traditions of the Senate, and the president disparages it in a way that's destructive, essentially saying, let's have a shutdown. The president's been complaining about a lack of bipartisanship in Washington. Well, this deal is exactly how Washington should work when it is bipartisan. Both parties negotiated and came to an agreement on a piece of legislation that we can each support. It is truly a shame that the president is degrading it because he didn't get 100% of what he wanted.
All right, so why is Schumer spiking the football? Why is he so happy? Answer, because the Republican leadership on Capitol Hill caved again. They promised one thing, but delivered another, something vastly different than a so-called skinny budget that does not fund Democrat pet projects. In other words, they lie. The proof is in the budget. The proof is in Paul Ryan's so-called earmarks ban. Joining me now from our bureau in Washington, D.C., editor-in-chief at Big League Politics, Patrick Howley. Patrick, when you look at the big picture here, it's clear, I mean, especially when you look at the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate, but let's look at the House. There's a shell game going on here by the Republican leadership. They are truly misleading the American public by what they are saying and then what they are doing, how they are governing, and what they are passing through the hallowed halls of Congress.
Yeah, Graham, this isn't a case of them caving. This is a case of them being complicit. Back when we had John Boehner as Speaker and Obama was the president and we didn't have a supermajority, that was caving. This is a situation where we have a Republican in the White House who's a good guy, and then we have Republicans with majorities in both houses of Congress, and they're not such good guys. The congressional Republicans, to a large degree, the leadership, are complicit with the Democrats. That's what's going on right now. I'm coming out with new evidence to show that Paul Ryan actively coordinated with Hillary Clinton during the election to sink Trump. I reported a story about how Paul Ryan's earmark ban is complete nonsense. They're still putting earmarks in, and in fact, they have a secret process for doing so. Paul Ryan is complicit with the Democrats and with Chuck Schumer, and right now the Trump White House is getting played, and frankly, even though I've been laying off him lately, I blame Reince Priebus, a member of the Wisconsin Mafia, for doing what Paul Ryan wanted and not what the president wanted.
All right, you've bitten off a lot there for us to chew on. I agree with you on Reince Priebus. I think he's a horrible selection, and I think before the year is done, Reince Priebus is going to be gone, because I think Donald Trump is going to figure out that Reince Priebus is in it for Reince Priebus and also all of the establishment Republicans who, you're correct, it really isn't a cave. They are colluding to do what is not in the best interest of the American people. And here's an example. Here's an example. This is from the Rules Committee, a little slice from the Rules Committee as they were looking at the budget. Roll tape.
In this bill that is funding for Planned Parenthood, money that's set aside for Planned Parenthood, or can you discuss any of the issues related to women's health?
There's no funding in our bill for Planned Parenthood. The Department of Health and Human Services does have family planning funds, and the determination as to where those funds go that responsibility lays with the Secretary. But there are no funds in our bill for Planned Parenthood.
But we know otherwise. There is funding for Planned Parenthood. There's also funding for Obamacare. So again, the Republicans in Congress simply are not being truthful about what they're doing. Now, that leads us to what you pointed out. You uncovered Paul Ryan lying, saying that there is an earmarks ban. Explain, walk us through how the earmarks process works, and then walk us through what Paul Ryan is doing to circumvent that.
Yeah, so basically, Paul Ryan is somebody who, in the interest of appearing ethical or appearing to have propriety, announced an earmark ban in the last two Congresses, said we're not going to have pork barrel spending anymore, we're not going to allow Republicans to quietly go in or any members of Congress to go in and get pork money for their districts without a floor vote by a full congressional vote, right? That's how earmarks work. I just published a PowerPoint presentation with never-before-seen slides. It was a presentation that Republican House leadership gave to members of Congress, showing them that the earmark process was still going on, just don't call it earmarks. And there still is a submission process used many thousands of times for getting earmarks into these bills, and the process goes on. So the earmark ban was a lie, and it's a lie that it's the kind of lie that we've seen all week from Republican leaders.
Right, bypasses.
Because this is a sad day for Washington.
I agree. This earmark situation bypasses the regular occurrence that's supposed to happen on the floor and within the chambers of the United States Congress in subcommittees and in committees. It bypasses even a floor vote and takes it directly to the markup process. And again, this is kind of down in the weeds. It's a little bit on the mundane side, but it cuts out 3 or 4 steps and goes straight to the heart of the matter, and that's how they insert these earmarks, correct?
Yes, and in fact, they even have a slide showing the, typical process for how a bill becomes a law, as we all learned on Schoolhouse Rock. Right. And then they have a little yellow arrow cutting out the first 4 steps and saying, this is what we're going to do. So, yeah, it's completely corrupt. They're not draining the swamp. The swamp is getting bigger.
94% success rate. We have a slide from that PowerPoint. This is taken from it. And the slides boast how many of these earmarks are getting in from the Agriculture Department? 85% of the submissions. Congratulations, Paul Ryan. Energy and Water, 91%. Interior, 93%. Homeland Security, 92%. So what we're looking at here is Paul Ryan telling the American people one thing, that we're not going to have earmarks anymore, and then doing something completely opposite, indeed infusing earmarks into these pieces of legislation, which explains something, Patrick. We're all wondering, why is the national debt going up exponentially and the deficit going up under Republican Congresses? Well, this is why. This is certainly one of the reasons, but here's why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what the president needs to do right now is send a message to these corrupt congressmen, and he needs to shut down the government. And he doesn't have the Republican leadership support in order to do that. And I think that's why he's finding himself relatively weak today in these negotiations. And he's saying, well, maybe we'll have a shutdown in September. There's not going to be a shutdown in September if there's not a shutdown now. You know, this is ridiculous. The president needs to do what he needs to do for the American people, and he needs to shut down the government. And it's not too late. He can still do it. He can still do it today if he's watching, Mr. President. Shut down the government, sir.
You know, and he can't trust, certainly can't trust Paul Ryan. He can't trust the entire Republican leadership structure in the House. Mitch McConnell has surrendered essentially his powers. The president is right. They should lower the threshold for everything. Get rid of cloture. Lower it to a 51% majority, get tax reform through, get the work of the American people through, get the wall built, and certainly don't trust these people on Capitol Hill. This is part of the draining of the swamp process. And yes, go ahead. Shut down the government. Since 1976, it's been shut down 18 times, and we're still here. He needs to go directly to the American people. He needs to bypass the mainstream media and bypass all the static on Capitol Hill, go directly to the American people and say, here's what's going on, here's how you're being hoodwinked by these people, and here's what we need to do. Patrick, great work. Love to have you back on the program. Thank you. Coming up next, more excuses from Hillary about her loss to Trump. Also ahead, Janet Napolitano, the University of California system, and the revealing audit.
I am sorry that we did it this way, but because it has created the wrong impression and detracted from the important fact that we accept the recommendations in the audit report.